Hello my friends, Mr. E here, and it's time for one of my favorite style of videos, and I know it's you guys too. It is time to discuss what is the most powerful class in Darktide, and this is always a great one. It gets a lot of discussion going in the comments, on the forums, wherever. Debate with me if you think I'm wrong, but I think my explanations here are going to be pretty firm. You might look at the timeline on the video, but hell, we got 7 classes to go over now, guys. I gotta give them each their due and talk about exactly why I want to place them where I'm placing them. And the very first thing I want to touch on today is to say what exactly it is I believe makes a class strong when we consider what is the strongest class in Darktide, right? That is to say, the strongest class in Darktide is the one that counters the game's challenges the hardest. So, in Darktide, there's a challenge, right? You have to get through the level, the enemies attack you, and they try to kill you, and you need to kill them, presumably, in order to get through. Or at least that's the way that we will be kind of scaling it. We'll assume that everyone's going to try to kill all the enemies and not just be friends or run past them. So, if the game has a certain bag of tricks it's pulling from, and it's a diverse bag of tricks, and you can't quite predict what the game is going to do, well then a character that is a multi-tool, that is multifaceted and has a lot of flexibility to counter those certain tricks, well then it could be very, very powerful. That might be your god tier character. Or, and this might be subtle foreshadowing, or if there's maybe Darktide has become over-reliant on a small handful of tricks and a small handful of techniques to make the game quote-unquote harder, and you've got characters that directly counter what it is that makes the game quote-unquote hard, well then you have godlike characters, right? You have a character who is the direct foil, the antithesis to the actual challenge of the game, who can just say, that's challenge for every other character, but not for me. I'm existing with a completely different set of rules. And that is what we're going to see as we work our way up the power structure. So the second thing I'll say here before we start ranking and talking about the characters is no character in this game right now is bad. There are simply weaker characters and stronger characters. Every character on here is capable of clearing the highest level content, even with I'd say like a 75 percentile skill level. It's not that hard, and the weakest character in the game right now, I would say, is the closest to being what I would think is balanced. They don't have anything that is able to abuse and break the game, and then as we work our way up the power structure, we will add in more and more things on these classes that if a player wanted to, and a lot of times players do want to, if a player was motivated to, they could use those things to simply abuse the game systems, to do levels of damage and crowd control and provide survivability that was simply not intended, or there's simply no way for the game to deal with. And that's what we'll see as we go up. It's like we're starting at like what I would expect to be the balance level for the game, and we're working our way up to god power that's just completely overpowered for what is actually arrayed against us in most games. And like I often say, we have no place to start but at the bottom and then work our way up, just like I did to your mom last night. And that means at the very bottom of our pile, the weakest character in all of Darktide right now, but that's not really saying anything when you are in a pantheon of gods, is the Arbites. The Arbites, okay, so, this guy has fallen a lot, right? It's been 1 year since the Arbites release, and when he released, I ranked him as the strongest character of the game. Now, that might have been putting a little bit the cart before the horse, but I still would have contended, even some, 3-6 months later, that he was among the stronger of the characters in the game. That is because his initial release, he had an incredible amount of additional power. He had a ton of talents. There was a joke that like this class has like 7 or 9 different 15% damage talents, and he was also tough as nails, and he still retains that tough as nails property, right? He can crowd control the hell out of enemies, he can bludgeon the shit out of them, and then to boot, he's got really strong base damages. And at the time, this game was not nearly so intense. I think that's a thing that people don't really remember or recognize, or maybe you didn't even know, but go back and watch some of my videos and watch the gameplay, even the Havoc gameplay that's going on at that time. It is much, much less intense. There are far fewer enemies and far fewer specials and all that sort of stuff on the screen than there are in modern day Darktide, and he was running those enemies over roughshod with that extra damage and bullying enemies into the dirt. At the same time, he was also paired up with the Ogren, who had just recently had a buff, and both of them were so strong, and they could just completely bulldoze games. But over the course of the remainder of the year, they saw little bits of their power shaved off here and there. 5% off one talent, 2.5% off another, and then we are left with modern day Arbites. And nothing really happened to the Arbites to make him a whole lot weaker. It's just that every other class has leapfrogged him by leaps and bounds. They have just jumped ahead of him in some massive way or another. So as far as the Arbites specifically, what exactly is it that I think that are his strengths, and why is he ranked at the lowest in my list? First of all, he really just isn't able to manage bosses or lots of armor by himself. If he gets tasked with a boss, you might not notice this when you're with the team, but if a boss shows up, you are going to be there all day, because while this guy has a pretty strong base damage in order to get rid of lower health enemies up to about the Mauler level, it's when you get into those really higher health enemies like Crushers and the bosses themselves where your couple thousand damage on a swing doesn't really, or a couple hundred damage on a swing doesn't really start adding up, right? You're hitting the boss hundreds of times. Other characters in the game have scaling abilities. They have bleeds, they have dots, they have huge finesse multipliers that can crit for thousands upon thousands of damage. The RBDs just doesn't have that, right? So he can just absolutely bulldoze his way through lower health enemies and enemies that he can stagger and put to the floor, and that is where his strength is in combat. He can just crowd control them endlessly with his shield slams, but he can't do anything when an array of enemies is against him that has cumulatively hundreds of thousands of HP, right? He just does not fundamentally have anything in his kit to deal with that. He'll be killing them all one at a time over and over and over again, and the best things he can do in those sort of situations are Shock Mine and the shield charge, aka hold the line, break the line, whatever it's called. I think it's hold the line. But those two abilities, they are very, very good abilities. However, they are best as primed setup for the team, right? They support the team primarily, and he doesn't really have any follow-up damage of his own. So yes, he can play with the charge and forceful and lone wolf, and you're a capable melee spec. However, this melee spec is going to be out-damaged by pretty much every other melee spec in the game right now. And the extra survivability that you have, yes, it's very, very good, but I think there's other characters that are equally as tanky here, and might even be more tanky, and also can peak some very, very impressive damage in a similar role. But this character, he's very survivable, he's very, very easy to play, but he lacks that top-end power, right? There's no scaling available for the poor RBDs. He doesn't have like a hypothetically very high cap. You kind of will reach your cap fairly early on, and I think that makes him a great starter character for players, and he's a good character all the way through the game. But when I'm entering into a Havoc 40 and I absolutely want to win this one, the RBDs is probably the lowest down on the list in terms of which one I'd want to bring, because he has one of the least impacts directly on the game. So that's where I'd put RBDs, and it's sad to say, but someone has to be in the last slot. And right behind him, though, is another character that I have been feeling pretty bad about lately, in part because of the role that he has been forced into, and that is the Zealot. So the Zealot is a character with two different modes, right? He has a melee DPS mode, the Retribution Paladin mode, and the Holy Paladin mode with Chorus. So he, in the DPS mode, can give some very, very good boss killing potential. He can do decent horde clear. We're talking Relic Blade, we're talking Stealth or Charge, right? Those are his bread and butter. He could also use Eviscerator, but I think right now Relic Blade is his absolute top tier pick in those slots. And the problem is that even though he is super strong in his roles, and he can like one-shot bosses with with Shroud Field and backstabbing, which is kind of his unique thing that he can provide, even though it's not that unique anymore, there is some like trouble when I think about the context of running him as a melee DPS character on a team, right? If I'm running him as a melee DPS character, my input to the team, my value to the team is really dependent on how much damage I can do. And I simply know for a fact that there are characters out there that even if all I was doing was DPSing with my sword or whatever, I could provide more team-wide utility whilst still providing more damage. So he's got very solid damages, and again, like I said, I think that the Zealot and the RBDs are pretty damn close to what I would consider balanced for the game, but he doesn't have, again, anything that can really excel him upwards and scales infinitely, except for, of course, the most boring ability in the game, Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude. So on the flip side, from the survivability and the clutch options, which you can still retain with from the DPS spec into this spec, but the DPS spec has high damage and no real game-changing ability, right? It's just down to whether or not you kill stuff. However, we can sacrifice a fuck ton of damage to stand around and pulse our holy relic all day, and I'm just in the corner straight pulsing my relic. And this chorus ability is so strong that you would bring this character on your team even if he did 0 damage, right? Because it is something that simply scales everybody else. Every, let's say, 40 seconds, you're going to have a 8-second, 9-second timeout where all the enemies can't do anything. After that time, you are going to be fully topped out on toughness. You're going to have gold toughness for the next 10 seconds. It gives you a 30% damage buff for that duration. His biggest strength, this character's biggest strength right now, ironically, is that, just like Diabetes, he is a setup character for other characters to excel. He uses Chorus to buy everybody else the time to actually play the game and clean up enemies, and that is his strongest possible build, the winningest build in like Havoc 40. Yes, you could do like, you could do pretty impressive damage with Shroud Field, Fat Mangus, and stuff like that. However, there's no way you could say that that is as strong and impactful as just simply running Chorus, which is mind-numbingly boring to run because you're just standing there, right? And the problem is that even with this Chorus being as powerful as it is, right, even the fact that it buys time for everyone to do their actual jobs and it shuts down these nuisance enemies, what if, hypothetically, what if there were some classes in the game that could crowd control enemies to that level while also continuing to deal more than double the damage that this character can deal in that configuration, right? Or even triple, right? And no prizes for guessing that yes, there is. There's definitely characters that can do this, that they can crowd control the entire fucking room and they can nuke the room at the same time, which is problematic to why you would want a Zealot. Now, I still think you want a Zealot because he has corruption removal aura, which is great because Fat Shark can't stop adding the stupid green goop to my Havoc rotations, and he's got good synergies with different classes. I think he's a very valuable. He provides 10% crit to the team, right? However, I just don't feel like this class has too much identity of its own anymore. I would really, really love a meta where the glorious days of melee DPS Zealot were like considered pinnacle power, but it's not even remotely close anymore because I think for first and foremost, the Relic Blade doesn't explode every enemy in like a 500-foot radius. So maybe if they made that buff, this character would move up a little bit. But anyway, he's at the 6th slot now. So that's number 6 out of the way. And now we can move on up to our number 5 slot. I almost said 7, but 5 slot with the Veteran. Oh boy, the Veteran is way down here at 5. Now, prior to this skitarii update, and at the start of the year, I made a big deal about there being the haves and have-nots. I separated into the martial and the caster classes, right? I said that the Arbites, the Ogren, and the Zealot were martial classes who could pretty much just bonk stuff, and then the Veteran, the Hive Scum, and the Psyker are caster classes. They get to play by their own rules. They get to print free grenades, free ammo, shoot infinite flamethrowers, poison stuff to death for billions of damage, rocket launchers, that sort of stuff, right? And obviously the disparity between those is pretty stark. The Veteran, however, has caught a couple of nerfs across the course of this year. So first of all, he has seen a series of nerfs to Voice of Command, aka Shout, his one OP ability. And that ability used to have a 30-second cooldown, and it had a 15-second protection buff. That protection buff is maybe the most valuable thing in the entire game, right? Gold toughness is beyond broken. It protects you against any form of damage. You could take 1 quintillion damage, and if you have 1 point of gold toughness, you will not take any health damage. That's how gold toughness works, right? It's a gate. So that is absurdly powerful to give that to players for the next 15 seconds, and on a 30-second cooldown, with the ability to replenish that cooldown less than every 15 seconds. So you do the math, right? So that was really, really OP. Now the cooldown is up to, I want to say it's 40 seconds, and the duration of that gold buff is down to 10 seconds. So you do the math, right? That overlapping, the constant pressure of having the gold and always having the immense stagger power and space clearing potential of the shout, it has been very much lessened. We have 1/3, 33% less of these shouts, and their buff lasts 33% less time. So we have widened this gap where players are now vulnerable when they are playing veteran, and when players who have a veteran on their team are vulnerable. So the value of that shout has been lessened. To back that up, though, he also doesn't really have any other identity in his other abilities. There's no utility or value truly provided to the team by running Executioner Stance or by running the Infiltrate ability. Yes, you can like stealth away from a situation and pick somebody up, I guess, but you are still going to be providing the most value to the team and be the strongest character with the shout ability. So as its power decreases, so does the veteran, right? And the other thing that was buoying the veteran, as I addressed in my tier list from earlier this year, he has 3 main things going, right? He is a shout bot, he is a ranged gun spam bot, and he is a grenade spam bot. And they haven't hit his ability to range spam yet, but they have hit his grenade spam because they nerfed crack grenades. They nerfed crack grenades so that the crack grenades don't generate every minute for his free generation. They are generating only every 90 seconds, I think now, which is a pretty sizable nerf, right? Even though you can still regenerate 5% of all your elite and specialist skills as grenades for the class, which means you're still going to be throwing 100 grenades a game. That is an impactful nerf, and it means that you're that much less likely to have a grenade on hand when you need it. And that was one of his main roles. And this is something I've been saying about the veteran from the beginning, is because his builds are not very diverse. I mean, look at my veteran builds, right? There's very, very little diversity in the first 2/3 of the tree. Then you'll get to the ability, and then after that, that's where the build diversity happens, is in the keystone. But most of these builds are running grenades. All of them are running grenade regeneration perks, right? That is core to his identity, is getting these grenades out in the field, and core to his identity is also the shout thing generally. He just doesn't have that much to rely on outside of that. So as those get nerfed, so does his power. And I think we're finally at the point where I genuinely don't feel all that in control of the game when I'm playing as the veteran, because my shout is not up often enough to like keep enemies at bay. My range capabilities, my range damage capabilities are being outshined by a floating skull apparently now, and the grenades that I once was hurling at every armored enemy in the galaxy are a little bit less common to replenish. And I think this is fine, right? To be clear, I wanted this for the character. I wanted his ability to spam this stuff to be tuned down, because it feels stupid to annihilate everything with a walking munitions factory, but it does put him lower than other characters who have gone unperturbed in their destructive ways. So yeah, that's what I'd say, is his long range capabilities are being trumped by the new guy on the block. His ammo generation is still nice, right? It's still very nice to have one of these guys in your team, because you get focus target, which is a massive buff. It enables you to just dogpile on bosses and high value targets in Havoc, etc. He still can get lots of crack grenades out. Shout is still an absolute powerhouse of an ability, but its power has been brought down a lot due to the deserved nerfs. And yeah, like I think his role as priority threat removal and utility is still solid. It's still there. But I would begin to question whether or not he would be in my top 4 for picking for an inclusion in a I want to guarantee I win this Havoc game, because I think that this is a thing that I'll come back to time and time again. He has a very low tide turning potential, and I do mean that in a punny way. His ability to say, nope, this situation is not going to kill us, we are now in control, is limited to how often he can shout, right? Versus there are other characters in the game who can simply erase everything in the entire screen, or do godlike damage, you know, whilst erasing everything in the entire screen. That sort of stuff can really turn the tide of a battle, and the veteran is left kind of scrambling and feeling a little bit anemic in that category. But that is not to say he's weak at all. Definitely a very capable class. But now we must go on to the veteran's replacement. They've been saying it for years, guys. They've been saying it ever since they introduced the RBDs. This is just veteran. They're just replacing veteran. I did not believe them, but I mean, little did I know, they didn't replace veteran with skitarii, they replaced him with the servo skull. The servo skull on skitarii is next is the 4th slot. No, I'm just kidding. It's skitarii. Skitarii is dead in the center, I believe. I think this class is as balanced as Fat Shark could have potentially hoped for this class to be as a release. It is kind of insane that this class has not been panned as either comically underpowered or absurdly overpowered, right? It's just dead in the center. There are certainly things about this class that are very, very powerful. However, there are foils to that. There are weaknesses incumbent within this class by design, and I have to be like, you know, hats off to you guys. Like, this is a very well executed class that I think, yes, it does toe the line in terms of what is appropriate power for Darktide, but at the same time, it is nowhere near a war criminal like the rest of the cast are. So this new class guy here, he is really well balanced feeling. I would say his primary strengths are in his long range target removal. Specifically, the skull with New Spirit Command is better than literally any veteran you've ever played with in terms of like the ability to tag and instantly annihilate like that trapper or whatever. He can even jump over, like you can just shoot over boxes, so you can be like covering behind stuff and just jump and let him shoot over it, which is so funny. But yeah, the New Spirit Command on the skull is disgusting. We can revive people with it. Arc Rifle. Oh my god, dude. Like, Arc Rifle is a disgusting monstrosity of a weapon, right? This thing is nasty, and it is, you know, exclusive to this class, and it gets so many synergies. You've got Phosphor Pistol, which can dunk on tons of stuff and is very flexible, does solid boss damage, but at the same time, even while he is, like, I would say primarily a ranged priority target eliminator, he also is a very capable sort of melee set, right? That's further boosted by the fact that he gets to have the Cord Claw, which is sort of his signature ability, you know? That ability alone, I would say, pushes him to the top of the pile, or near the top of the pile in terms of boss killing potential. If you've ever seen a captain on a team where a skitarii has the Cord Claw, boom, they're dead, right? The twins have bet their fucking match with this guy on the team now. They used to ambush teams and be like, oh no, no one has any twins damage, and now the skitarii is just up here fucking the New Spirit is shooting him in the head. You're shock mauling him in the grundle, and then you rip their face off with the Cord Claw, and they're dead in like literally 2 seconds. So these guys are chumps since these skitarii released. So yeah. He dunks on bosses. He's a single target monstrosity powerhouse at destroying this stuff. He also gets a lot of potential in terms of like priming for teams. He has unique synergies with applying brittleness to enemies through arcs and shock. He can weaken up enemies both by shooting them with the Phosphor Pistol and with the skull, adds damage taken debuffs. You know, all that additive damage stuff, it's not only good for him, which he is good at following up on, but it's good for everybody else too. So having a skitarii on the team is valuable just all around. It boosts everybody else's damage, which when everybody else's damage is 1 bajillion, you get like 1.2 bajillion, which is really fucking good, right? That's a big upgrade. So yeah, I would say that the class has damage that's competitive, like raw damage, even melee that's competitive at a baseline with all of the classes below him in terms of the power, and also provides team-wide buffs in terms of like crowd control and extra damage potential. And then this class also has unique things like Voltaic Emitter. The Voltaic Emitter, I would say, if this ability, and I think it's a pretty good ability as it is, but if this ability gets buffed to like ignore cover, or even ignore like partial cover on enemies, and therefore can be more consistent in the enemies it disrupts, I think this could potentially be one of the stronger abilities in the entire game, because it has a massive tide turning potential here, right? It's a 2-second forced stun shock and disrupts everything in range out of 30 meters. If this gets buffed to actually hit ranged enemies with like good consistency, it could absolutely top the charts, and you'd want one of these guys in the game because one of the most annoying things is when the whole fucking room is filled with gunners and you can't make that entrance. The skitarii can, right? The skitarii can get out there, whomp, everything's turned off, annihilate, and from there it's just GG, you win. So yeah, the only downsides I see to the skitarii right now are he's got a little bit of a lack in a couple of his blitzes, which is okay because the new spheric skull is so fucking insane that you really wouldn't even care to pick anything else. And he has his ranged auto aim ability, advanced combat doctrines, that is probably just not geared for being played in Havoc due to the ammo consumption properties, right? Of course, you could use it with the arc rifle, and it would be god tier, of course. But the arc rifle just makes anything it touches god tier. So even with generally what I would say about the character is he's got a very solid ranged arsenal, but his melee arsenal, but his ranged arsenal I find a little bit lacking. He's got pretty much like 2 guns, the phosphor pistol and the arc rifle, that I would say are like top tier here. But like these weapons are so exceptional that it literally doesn't even matter. The rest of it kind of sucks. The arc rifle particularly is just destroying hordes of mixed metal and elites faster than any other weapon. And usually you're like, oh, you know, like the weakness of AoE weapons is they can kill all the chaff, but they can't kill the armored targets who are resistant to that sort of stuff. No, the arc rifle doesn't care. It just kills everything. It's just doing thousands of damage every single tap, and you get 280 fucking shots or whatever the hell it is. Like it is absurd. The damage level of output you can put out without even like a specialized build with this thing. Just get a couple of talents to synergize with it. Disgusting. So overall, I would say the skitarii has absolutely supplanted the veteran as this role's premier, or the game's premier specialist and elite remover. Although he still lacks like frontlining power, and I would say his biggest weakness is he can be easily overrun by like aggressive hordes, right? If you're on a team with skitarii like many of us were on release, what you were noticing was that, like, yeah, if a big horde came in, you can get jammed up pretty quick because he doesn't have a whole lot of like shove back and get the fuck away and like hard crowd control like that. So he is really, really solid if you pair him with a team of crowd controllers like the Ogren, like the Zealot or the Arbites, right? If you put him behind those guys and they get out there and they keep enemies busy, this guy can deal untold damage because they can clean up all the chaff a lot of times, and then they're left with those hard targets or those range targets, and the skitarii just sit back there like pop, 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 just annihilating everything. Very, very effective at doing that, and very resource efficient to do it as well. So that's where I place skitarii, dead in the center. Great character. I love playing as this guy. Definitely my favorite character to play right now. Very cool. Okay, well, let's go up above him. Now we are getting into the dangerous territory, right? Now we're getting into the characters that I think are yeah, I don't know, man. I want them to be strong. I want characters to be strong in the game, but then you'll play a game with someone who knows what they're doing on the character, and you're like, okay, we are not, this game is dead. It's just fucking dead. You've killed it. You killed it with this. And the next one up that has some elements of that, not all elements, but some elements of that, is the Ogren. So I've come around the Ogren, right? But I will say only in a few narrow contexts. So I think right now the incorrect way to play Ogren is with the shield as a tank. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. That era of Ogren is over, right? That does not provide anywhere near enough value in terms of, like I said at the beginning, dealing with the shit that the game throws at you, solving the equation or solving the combat puzzle. So we want to counter the challenge of the game, right? And what's the #1 challenge of the game right now? Say it with me. Density. I don't know. What did you guys say? I don't know. Type it down below. But yeah, density. There's so much shit. There's so many fucking hordes, there's so much metal, there's like 3 crushers coming at you all the time, and the problem for teams is they get overrun, right? This stuff gets on them, and they can't get it off, and it beats them to death, and then it beats their corpse to death, and then it revives their corpse because it's Nurgle, and then it beats it to death again. But then the Ogren comes in and says, no, I taunt all of you. Everything is under my control now, little ones. And he says yes, and then everybody else is like, wow, thank you, Uncle Ogren. now all of the enemies can't attack us for the next 19 seconds. Sorry, hold on, let me do the math here. What is it? It's like a 9-second buff. Was it? Isn't it like 9-second buff with like a 3, and it repeats every 6 seconds after that? So it's like a 21-second buff. It's insane, right? It gets 2 repeats after the initial duration, and it taunts enemies the entire time. If follow this logic, right? If taunting enemies means they can only attack you, and then you don't die to those enemies, what does everybody else on the team get to do, right? There you go. That's the problem, or that's the solution, I guess. The taunt simply just invalidates all the challenge of the horde or whatever the fuck is trying to get on your team and get, like, you know, crowd you out and says, no, I got this, hold on. And then everybody else gets to free DPS, like, whatever they want to do, right? If you ever played WoW, right? I make a lot of like analogies and stuff to WoW and games like that. But in WoW, usually there's a burn phase where like you finally cleared all of the chaff and you don't have to do any more mechanics for like a good long period, and everyone blows all their fucking cooldowns because you know you get a solid 90 seconds of just DPS as hard as you fucking can. You don't have to worry about anything. That is what can happen when the Ogryn taunts and he has good control on the crowd, right? When nothing can actually stand up and fucking try to attack your team, they don't have to worry about that anymore, and they can go full out in damage potential, which clears so much up. So number one, taunt is hugely fucking powerful in this equation. That is the number one thing I think that brings him into the rank that he's actually at. Right behind that, though, you know, I've been saying that the slab shield is good and all, and the grenade gauntlet is good, but right behind that are 2 other weapons that are just absolutely bonkers. The Power Maul and the Rumbler. Now, the Rumbler has long been a known, like, entity in terms of, like, being power creep, right? And we do have an issue with that and, like, point-blank barrage, but I would say that's probably less so because that's just, you know, that's just AoE explosion damage, right? There are other classes that can do AoE damage like that, like, those are more problematic than this. But if you are on a team where the Ogryn is the only ammo user, which a lot of times does happen these days because you get a lot of hive scums who have pickpocket, you get a lot of psychers who don't have any ammo at all, you get veterans who don't care about ammo, zealots who don't care about ammo. The Ogryn's like, oh, well, I'll take point blank barrage and Rumbler, I guess I'll do a little bit of damage over here, and then he's just like fucking destroying the map and doing like 3 billion damage. You know, it's fun, right? It's really fun when you're doing it, and then you're trying to play, just hypothetically, you're trying to record a game for skitarii, and then there's someone on your team who's using Rumbler. I know you watch my videos, I know you are, I know you remember that game, where everything is just getting blown up by the Rumbler with point-blank barrage, and you can't really actually demonstrate the build because it's just annihilating enemies everywhere. And listen, I'll take some responsibility for the fact that, like, I said that Point Blank Barrage has too long a cooldown at 80 seconds, but it's not Point Blank Barrage's fault. It's the fucking Rumbler's fault, right? The Point Blank Barrage is fine on other ability or other weapons, but it's the Rumbler that makes this stupid. That you can just shell out mortar strike after mortar strike after mortar strike all game long. And okay, so to go back to the one that I think is actually probably even better, the fucking Power Maul, right? So we have a character here whose base ability, the base thing that makes him super strong is, okay, everybody, round up, y'all, come on in, it's time for dinner, come on in close to Uncle Ogryn here, whoop-bam, you know, dropping the fucking atomic hammer on them on a, like, what, 9-second cooldown? So you have this absolute chain of just fucking the enemies where you're gathering them up, they finally catch up to you, you shove them back with the force of like a horse kicking them in the head, and then you drop the Power Maul on them and instantly kill a Crusher on Havoc 40, plus you kill everything else within 10 feet, and then everything else out to 20 feet is like stacked with burning and laying on the ground, rolling around, right? So we have crowd control, draw everything else in, and then when you actually are like, oh no, about to get overrun, just explode your way out of there, right? So the Ogryn just becomes like this unstoppable, like, he's like a black hole that gathers in enemies and then just like explodes them periodically as they try to actually get them. So once you learn how to position as Ogryn and play without the shield and stuff like that, and you can just, you know, survive those brief 8 seconds while you wait for the Power Maul to cool down, then you just drop the hammer on him again and you just proceed to do more damage than any other devoted melee character can do, well, barring the top two in the game, right? But, you know, more damage than a tank character should reasonably be able to do, right? You are, like, what I would be saying here is, if you're playing like defensive Ogre and blocking and stuff, you're just wasting the potential of the class at this point, because the Power Maul is so fucking strong at just blowing everything the fuck up. Widespread destruction, widespread stagger, that is the name of the game for Ogre right now. Enemies simply cannot stay on their fucking feet. They get taunted, which staggers even bosses back for like at least a second. Then they all try to get to you. Then they get like dropped by the fucking Power Maul. They're laying on the ground. They get back up. They get dropped by a Rumbler grenade that was fired at his feet. They get back up. They get dropped by the Power Maul again. They get taunted again. And it's rinse and repeat because the taunt is on such a short cooldown due to the, what's it called? Like go again or whatever. Like the staggering enemies gives you your cooldown back. It's up like every 15 seconds. And this guy can just regenerate for days. So yeah, this guy is just like that particular setup there with like taunt, Power Maul, Rumbler intersection somewhere in there is definitely like where he is at his strongest in terms of just bullying his way through games. Like you take a team of like 3 Skitarii, and I've done this, take a team of 3 Skitarii and, you know, run 4 Skitarii. Hard, pretty hard, right? You don't have a whole lot of beef. Put an Ogren with taunt and Power Maul at the head of that. You will fucking roll that game over. No fucking shot the enemies can win against that, because you just absolutely grab everything's attention, you slam it all to the ground, and the Skitarii clean up everything that doesn't die immediately. And yeah, it's disgusting. So, yeah. I would say that this character is very strong, but in a very, very narrow window, right? That's what I'm worried about for Ogre. It's like, okay, yeah, if they nerf the Power Maul, if they nerf Taunt, if they nerf Rumbler, he would drop precipitously in a similar vein to what we saw with the Veteran. Now, they probably should, but not before they hit these other 2 characters at the top, right? Definitely don't hit my boy Ogren. He needs his time in the sun. I love the Power Maul. Please, please don't take the Power Maul from me. I'll do anything. So yeah, that's where I think he's at right now. I would say that he is only not higher because he lags behind the high-end potential of the top 2 classes. He doesn't have any truly absurd or exponential scalings, but he is super powerful for like just strong arming through difficult enemies and compositions, especially while he's backed up with a team of like damage dealers, right? If you've got damage behind you and you're playing as Ogren and you can crowd control effectively and stay alive while you're taunting, G fucking G. So there you go. Ogren's eaten, well, I mean, you get to play like 2 builds, but they're strong at least. Anyway, going on to the number 2 spot. And, you know, no prizes for guessing what's in the last 2 spots, I suppose. It's the Hive Scum, keeping his number 2 spot, right? Keeping the Hive Scum here. His toxin-related damage, even though it was nerfed by like 30% across the course of the last period of time we've been talking about this, his scaling is so insane, right? This is the first character where we start to see scaling in terms of the numbers game being played that sort of breaks Darktide. So he gets to not only have this toxin effect that can shred carapace bosses, 1 tap from Needle Pistol just kills any elite up to like a Mauler, right? All that stuff, he gets all that, plus he can scale his melee numbers into the low stratosphere, like conservatively, and he is insanely competitive in terms of melee damage from that angle, right? Dual shivs or even bonesaw, right? Those numbers that you'll put up with melee alone are disgusting. Not to mention the like aggression this character can be played with to just go and do whatever the fuck you want, in the vein that the old like Zealot with like knife used to be able to do. But the Hive Scum is even better at that because he can blow up like pretty much anything. And then any difficult targets that might not die instantaneously, we've got the Needle Pistol as a backup for that, where you just tap them a couple times and now they're just ailing for a bajillion damage and getting murderized. The character rate, the character is balanced around being a glass cannon, but the way that you are glass in Darktide is that you don't have very much like defenses on its face. However, they gave him a pretty respectable amount of defenses, especially in Rampage mode, but the character has a ton of evasion built in. And I think that's the secret here. The secret, at least for the last 2 characters. Whereas Ogren can take a lot of damage on his chin and just kind of blast his way through the game, these last 2 characters here, yes, they are glass cannons. However, if you know what you're doing, once you learn how to play Darktide, the glass simply goes away, right? The tankiness function for RBDs, or for Ogun, or those are great when you are lesser skilled and are taking damage. But all damage in Darktide, well, almost all damage in Darktide is avoidable, and if you're playing High Scum, all damage is avoidable, because your dodges are fucking insane, your evasion, your movement speed is godlike, right? So a capable player does not give a fuck about the fact that he is a glass cannon. He's just a cannon, and the more power they give this character to compensate for that, the better he's eating. So yeah, he boosts his melee damage through things like hyper violence, and then he stacks it further with Rampage, and he can crowd control with the Rampage ability too, which can enable him to stagger anything, including bosses, twice. And he's also got the stim supply ability, which he can still push like insane numbers off the back of, literally just by spamming needle pistol and like just putting toxin on shit, right? Just playing the laziest possible way, you can like do incredible numbers while also having a stim supply that counteracts some of the more notorious deleterious corruption effects in the game, and it boosts your allies' damage. So you can be a multiplicative factor of the team with that, and still boast like incredibly competitive damage. He doesn't have to care about ammo, but like the ammo thing, it really kind of, the thing that sucks about this class is that the just like what we have with the skitarii, the ranged archetype isn't really there, because there's no way to sustain the amount of ammo this character would use unless you're using the needle pistol, which does not give a fuck. Like one shot is like a bajillion damage, and you can get 20% of your ammo back all the time thanks to pickpocket. And oh wait, we haven't even touched on his blitzes yet, right? So yeah, even like post nerf, right? Even after both of his blitzes, his rocket launcher and his chem bombs have lost 1 charge each. So instead of 4 and 4, they're 3 and 3. These are still hands down the best blitz abilities in the entire game. No questions, 0 questions, right? There is no world in which even the closest competitor of the Ogryn's frag bomb with 1 charge is even remotely close to 3 chem bombs or 3 rockets. So yeah, do that math. What does that mean? Well, it means that every time you're in a game with the Hive Scum and they've got rockets, every character in the game knows, because of the power, they've seen what rockets can do, they just let them get the rockets. And the rockets are an instant fuck you, I win this fight button. Just anything big gets even remotely grouped up is now dead. And so those are disgusting, immense tide turning capability, right? And this is, keep in mind, this is on the back of a character that is already probably the most aggressive melee DPS character in the game in terms of the sheer numbers, like the damage potential that's out there if you are playing at that level. And he could also be dotting stuff up with the Tox pistol, and like, you know, and just bleeding these massive like armored enemies and bosses for tens of thousands of damage. And he is next to untouchable because he's so highly evasive. And then he gets the ability to screen wipe with a rocket launcher, or, you know, just completely shut down one whole avenue of approach with the chem bomb for 15 seconds, right? Those are god tier powers that are thrown on top of an already incredibly powerful character who's not even that squishy. And as we've said many times before on this channel, crits are like the name of the game in Darktide, and this character is the king of crits. He's got like 60-70% crits on anything. I mean, shit. The fact that I can take, and this is, members know, but I made a members build guide video with the Devil's Claw and Rampage. The Hive Scum can 2-shot a demon host with this. He literally just wakes him up and then parries him twice and he's dead. It's like, that is the power. You're like, oh, hit me. Okay, that'll be 23,000 damage, sir, right off your fucking face. And that's on the low end, honestly, for what you can do with that sort of stuff. So yeah, stupid character who often is kind of just buoyed by the fact that he's incredibly evasive. He has the needle pistol, the bone saw, and the shiv, which are all top tier in their categories, and then just massive fucking multipliers off of the back of that, right? He's got melee damage multipliers that just multiply everything. Every point of damage he deals is turned to like 10x that, and then he's got these time multiplying things where, for every second you're fighting, if you've got 2 bosses that are dotted up with the Tox pistol, and you can split your time and get the toxin around, you're just adding so much damage to the mix here. And yeah, it's like there's no other mixed melee character that can do as much single target and multi-target and have screen wipes and have single target like boss killing potential and be like this evasive, right? Yeah, so it's just silly. He's truly silly. He's not quite an exponential scaler, but he is really damn close, right? I would say that, like, you know, he is very much on the cusp of being problematic. I think they've realized, like, you know, 4 rockets, it was absolutely uncounterable in the most part, because like you're always going to have at least 1 rocket on hand to wipe the entire horde that's after you. So yeah, they've brought themselves back from the brink at the last possible second. Patrick have like pulled the rudder up and are steering away from making him get more power on Rampage or whatever. And they're kind of trying to reel him back in. But I think that as long as like the critical ratios exist on this class, with like Shiv's having a 5x crit ratio, I think as long as Rampage has this massive multiplier, yeah, I mean, what else can I say? Yeah. All right, now let's cap it off with you. I mean, you know the guy, right? You know who's sitting at the top of this pile. Now you've been able to do the process of elimination. Who could it be? It is the king of being problematic, the Psyker. The Psyker is broken, right? I've simply lost count of the myriad ways that this class can abuse the game and its systems to absolutely crush any semblance of balance. Like, and I'm not just talking about the Flame Staff, right? Simply equipping the Flame Staff alone would put any competent player at the top of their charts in terms of damage by at least 50%, right? Just having this thing on your team at all, even in the most defensive possible build with no interest in doing damage, if they are using the Flame Staff as much as you are capable at using the Flame Staff, you're wiping out just every horde. You are reducing the number of enemies in the game effectively by 75%, because there is so much damage going around. Plus this thing has, like, you know, for whatever reason, can like crowd control and panic enemies, so ranged enemies can't even do anything. So you'll just see enemies that are supposed to be fighting you just standing around going, oh no, there's some fire on me, and they just die, right? So this game, this staff removes hordes as a challenge element to the game, and it turns off a whole nother type of enemy from even engaging with you if they can be touched with it. So yeah, that's the Flame Staff. However, beyond the staff, this character has been singularly gifted with 3 abilities, which I would say only have a suggestion of a cooldown timer. The 3 abilities on this class, you know, to say that, like, the bubble, which has recently received a sizable nerf, like a big nerf to its cooldown time, the bubble is still ungodly powerful, because the bubble provides these insane damage like buffs, or like damage resistant buffs, regeneration buffs, and the cooldown is still not that bad. It's still like literally in the 20 seconds. So you can have perma bubble uptime and just go from bubble to bubble all the way across the map. And the fact that this character can equip a staff, a lot of it does come back to the Inferno Staff, but it's not all about the Inferno Staff in terms of power. The fact that you can just equip an Inferno Staff and then say, I don't fucking care what my ability is, I'll just use this support ability that does literally 0 damage, adds literally 0 damage to my build, and I'll still top DPS, right? I'll still kill, you know, 3x more enemies than any other individual character will. I might kill more common, like, individual horde enemies than the whole team combined, with a build that's not even focused on dealing damage. That is not even to talk about what's going on with the other abilities, namely one that's growing in popularity a lot, I've noticed, because I think players are growing bored with how powerful it is to play as Bubble Psyker and just win games. Venting Shriek. Now, I don't know like who conceptualized this, but Venting Shriek I would say, like, conservatively has about a 5-second cooldown, and it shoots a psychic blast that adds 6 stacks of burning, which is enough to wipe out most chaff enemies at a range of, it feels like 100 meters, and it goes through walls, right? So you can just be constantly going womp, womp, womp. And this, by the way, also staggers. So yeah, nothing that could have reached you before can now reach you. So you are able to just And this basically, well, also, you know, it's a venting shriek. It gets rid of your peril. So the system by which you're supposed to be limited in your power on Psyker is supposed to be like, okay, I'm casting. Now I got to vent by touching my little staff and rubbing my temples. No, you just cast and then you press your button to deal more damage and then you cast some more. So you have unbound, you know, no pun intended, but you've uncapped the class in terms of damage potential there with that modest 5-second cooldown. And yeah, then we have Scryer's Gaze, which has actually 0 cooldown, because Scryer's Gaze can be off of cooldown before Scryer's Gaze ends. This ability has been silently just kind of like building the Exodia of power, right? If you've been watching over the last years or so, you've watched as every patch another line of text has been added to the tooltip on this thing, to the point where now it's like, gain 25% damage and 25% crit rate and regenerate 3% of your toughness per second and fuck your mom and date your wife and like all that. Like, it does literally everything. That is insane, and the only reason it's continued to get buffs is because players are bad at Psyker, right? And Psyker will probably continue to get buffs because when Fat Shark looks at the data, they look at this class that people don't fundamentally know how to play and play it poorly, and they're like, oh, well, they lose a lot, must be bad, buff. But then what happens is you see the Psykers that have understood the basic fundamentals of how to play it, and they're like, oh yeah, this class is broken, right? It is to the point, you know, where Scryer's Gaze, even though, like, I would say Scryer's Gaze is probably the least powerful of the 3 abilities on the class, it is like metastasized and allowed the Psyker to become one of the dominant fucking melee characters in the game with the Force Greatsword, because of course he needs to have a fucking Moonlight Greatsword ass motherfucking blade that can just cast magical arcs of energy that can wipe and screen wipe. Like, this is the Relic Blade, but it can screen wipe now too. Cool, nice balance. Like, that just doesn't even feel fun when you're trying to compete with it with even like Hive Scum, who's like running around, you know, can at least keep up, but like the Psyker's so fast, he runs ahead and then just screen wipes everything with a big slash. Okay, cool, bro. Like, why am I even here as any other melee character? So you can just top the melee charts and make playing like a Zealot feel like a chump. You could also use Scryer's Gaze, by the way, I almost forgot about this, Warp Unbound, right? Warp Unbound means you can just free cast for 10 seconds, actually 11.5 seconds, after you cap your peril. So you get to cast for your entire peril bar, and then you can use 11 full seconds of just doing whatever the fuck you want with peril, which, like, peril is, at this point, more of a joke than and or a buff than a limit on the Psyker's actual potential, right? You can just spam cast electrokinetic staff, just hurl unlimited balls of energy. Like, you have not experienced problematic Psykers until you've experienced someone who knows what they're doing, the electrokinetic staff, and they're one room ahead of you with Scryer's Gaze active, and they're literally just exploding everything. Like, there's no enemies left when you get there because everything has been killed by these little stupid orbs that are flying across the screen. And it's like, okay, I thought we were supposed to have some sort of balance around like range killing every single enemy in the game that was called ammo, but then we had the Psyker who just, I guess, doesn't fucking care about the rules. On the fringes, by the way, of what could be considered actually playing the game, there also, for this class, exists like a multitude of animation cancels and macro abuse and shit that I'm sure you've like seen mentioned, or at least maybe like heard of, maybe even seen it used in a game. And this can elevate weapons on this class to absolutely unintended levels. I'm talking about like the Force Sword Deimos macro, which can do like 10k DPS, right? Even though these are not intended by design, the fact that these sort of exploits continue to crop up on the Psyker of all classes time and time and time again, I think says a lot about the state of the balance of the class, right? This class is just, it can ignore the concepts of cooldowns on abilities, because it's got Psychonetics Aura and Warp Siphon, and has a 10% cooldown aura, and it can stack 12% on Curios, right? It can sidestep the fact that it's supposed to be a quote-unquote squishy class because it doesn't have to worry about melee, because everything can be killed at range, and anything it gets close to you can be staggered with either Venting Shriek or left-clicking with the staff or whatever. If any ranged enemies are actually shooting you, they literally can't hit you because you have empathic evasion, which means that you have to only, oh my gosh, you have to crit every 1 second. It's only a 1 second buff. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, the Psyker just so happens to be one of the most consistently high crit rate characters in the game. So you're like always critting, and therefore you're always immune to range damage. So yeah, right now, what it feels like to me is I really liken Psyker, and like when I see Psykers in the wild and they want to join my games, I liken it to Jean Grey from the X-Men, if you know what I'm talking about. So you maybe seen the movies or whatever. So Jean Grey is a psionic. She is like incredibly potent in her own right, and you would like read the comics and you might maybe watch the movies, and you would be forgiven for seeing Jean Grey like in action and be like, oh wow, she's powerful. That's how I feel about the Psyker, right? The Psyker is like Jean, the Psyker is only tentatively bound by the rules of the game. And all it would really require is the right player with the right set of skills to unlock a power level that is truly just not appropriate for Darktide at all, right? And this is something that I firsthand experienced when I went and played Hivescum and then came back to Psyker, and I had realized how to position better and evade enemy melee attacks. And as soon as I was like, oh wait, I am good enough now to stay fluid while still casting and not get interrupted and not have to pull out my melee, I unlocked this like insane damage potential, like the ability to like constantly be pouring out thousands and thousands of damage, single-handedly erasing, I would say, again, conservatively, like 50% of the challenge of the game is the hordes and stuff, and I can just wipe all that out with the flame staff. So like I just stopped playing with flame staff because it feels cheap to do it, right? That is, I would say, it's a walking war crime, right? To the point where when I see Psykers with flame staffs, it just genuinely makes the game less fun for me. I see one who's trying to join my game, and I'm like, damn, it's a roll of the dice, right? I'm either going to get someone who has no idea what they're doing and they're following some meta build that I probably put online, to be fair, or I'm going to get someone who knows what they're doing on the Psyker, even moderately, and they are going to just kind of invalidate about 60 to 70% of the challenge of the game. They're going to make certain that every ranged enemy that's within 30 feet or 30 meters or whatever it is panicking and they can't shoot. Every horde is going to be wiped out by them and them alone. Yeah, I might get to help them with bosses, but it just genuinely isn't that fun when every single enemy is lit on fire and is being immolated. It removes so much of the potential damage that you're supposed to have to deal from the game, and it scales literally exponentially. This is what I was saying with the Hivescum. The Hivescum is like almost exponential. The Psyker, specifically with flame staff, is literal exponential. The more enemies there are, the better the Psyker is, and would you guess how the game is evolving, right? It's the more enemies, the way is how it's evolving. There's so much stuff, and so of course the Psyker is fucking insanely like relevant and powerful. And I choose generally to avoid playing with them when I'm recording for games and stuff, for the same reason I mentioned with like the Rumbler Ogren, where it's like, okay, I can't really demonstrate what I want to do if every horde I go into is just gonna fall down dead to Soul Blaze stacks within 3 seconds. And I just, at the same time, when I play games and there's not a Psyker, we don't have that guarantee of like X amount of like AoE damage, the game is an absolute slog. And I would directly point my finger at the fact that Psyker has been allowed to do this shit for so long that we are in the situation that we're in, where games are absolutely crammed to the fucking gills with enemies crawling out of everyone's asshole, because the Psyker can kill at 10x the rate of any other character, right? If every character was the Zealot and they had to manually go and delete enemies one by one with their holy sword, then we wouldn't have to have 10x the enemies in order to make the game competitive. But we have the Psyker who can literally just do what the Rumbler Ogren does, or you know, what the rocket launcher or the Tox Bomb on the Hivescum does, but full time. They literally make, you know, Tox bombing enemies and wiping out entire hordes their full-time fucking job, and that throws the balance of the game out of whack. It makes it look weird. So when Thatcher look at the game, they're like, oh, well, enemies are being killed at this rate, we need to make the challenge rating at Havoc blah blah this much. And then they push it, and it's like, okay, well, if you're not running with the Psyker, you're fucked. You're just like wading through seas of bullshit, and you like have to use AoE to counter it because it was designed with the expectation that you would bring the Psyker with the Flame Staff. So yeah, I legitimately don't know what Fat Shark will do about this. I was really hoping earlier in the year when they were talking about, like, you know, we can remove some of these outliers and stuff, that they were directly talking about the Flame Staff, but they didn't do anything in that patch, and I haven't heard anything since then. So, I mean, maybe that's coming back sooner rather than later. I would love to be in a stable state of the game where, like, I can play with a character who isn't just doing so much damage that I feel like I'm invalidated for even being there and even attempting to do anything. I feel like they could, if I wasn't there, like attempting to kill stuff, they have it, right? They're overstated, they're overcapable for what's in the game. So yeah, that's where I stand on the Psyker. Too powerful, just the most powerful, but just too fucking powerful. And if you don't see the vision just yet, you just haven't unlocked that Phoenix Force, right? You haven't seen the Phoenix Force come into its own full right and ruin your fucking game by just absolutely deleting everything before you can get a chance to play. So anyway, overall thoughts on the rankings here. I mean, obviously, I just do not like how powerful Psyker's been allowed to be for this long. That is what it is. Hive Scum is very powerful, but I think he's like acceptable in the way that he's powerful. He at least is fun to play, and it does take a lot of skill to get that damage out of him, even if the damage is very, very impressive. Ogryn, on the other hand, I think is very, very pigeonholed right now. He only has a few weapons that I would consider like in that viable category, and then or not viable, but like super powerful category, and then below that it's like a huge drop off. There's a precipitous drop off to like a very low rung of performers, like way below that, and that feels bad. I want the Ogre to have more diversity, especially considering he's only got like 6 weapons to start with. It'd be nice if more than 2 of them were, well, 3 of them, because the pickaxe is pretty good too, but the other ones really need some love to be brought and given something to, like, you know, actually hang their hat on. As far as the lower echelons, Skitarii, absolutely nailing it. I love where the Skitarii is at. Even if they were to buff the blitzes or you know, power overload or advanced combat doctrines, he's already probably reached his power cap, and even if he does go up a little bit in power somehow, say if they give him particularly busted other blitz or something, he's not even remotely in the realm of like game ruining levels of power like we have in the upper echelons. And below that we have probably the two characters I feel the worst for, the Zealot and the Veteran, who have steadily like sort of had their identity and like the role that they're supposed to be the quote-unquote best at eroded over time, where it's like, okay, Chorus is great for gold toughness providing and like staggering enemies, but what if it is taunted instead and people just decided to take less damage? I could just do taunt and we could do bubble, right? And then you just have like regen and everything would be crowd controlled, and I can still keep exploding things and having flame staff, right? Instead of using like Chorus, which makes your life fucking boring and miserable. And if you want to go for a melee spec on Zealot, it's like just worse Force Greatsword on you know, on the Psyker. The Zealot's one good role that he had in the past was like deep diving the backline, being super aggressive, being evasive, getting in, getting out. The Hive Scum can just do that, but better now. So yeah, the Zealot, he has the Relic Blade. I will give him that. He has the Relic Blade. He's the Eviscerator. These are really cool weapons I love to play with. But I would really want... I think he's like very high on my list of characters where I'm like, please a rework for diversity or something here. And then the Veteran falls on the same bracket where it's like, okay, yeah, we've nerfed the Shout, we've buffed these other abilities, but they're never gonna like really amount to anything because... I mean, they're just not, right? They have no game impact. I can see where enemies are through the wall. Like, that's just not impactful in the grand scheme of things like Shout is or like many other game abilities are. And he just, you know, he just is so mono-builded in terms of Shout, grenade production, gun, shoot ammo, right? And then maybe sometimes melee, right? That's the Veteran experience for you. And I get that he's like guardsman everyman sort of guy, John Darktide, but I don't want to feel like as boring as the name John Darktide suggests, right? I really want the Veteran to have something unique to hang his hat on. And ironically, the character I think I'm probably the most satisfied with out of all these ones is the RPDs. you know, if they just touch up Nuncio Aquila and make Nuncio like follow you around when you use it, so it's like not just being immediately invalidated when the combat doesn't occur inside this 10-foot circle, yeah, he would be like my choice for like the best balanced character in the game, right? There's nothing on him where I'm like, oh, this is like insanely powerful, this is insanely like stupid and weak, right? He just feels like pretty well rounded. He's appropriate for the power level the game is at. You fight hordes like mano a mano, you fight hordes, you fight bosses. Yeah, they might take a while, but they're fucking bosses, right? And yet like, he has his upsides and downsides, but he's very stable in that. I think he's probably in a really good spot. But I think maybe the thing, and I'll talk about this when I do the ranged and melee weapon tier list coming up shortly, guys. The thing that I think is holding a lot of these classes back is a general lack of weapon diversity, because a lot of the weapons in the game are just stinkers right now. So you're being forced into using your class's like 1 or 2 best weapons, and those weapons define the class, right? If you look at the classes, the Psyker, exclusive weapons are broken. The Hive Scum, the exclusive weapons are broken. The Zealot, Relic Blade, the exclusive weapon is broken, right? Ogren, Power, well, it's all exclusive for the Ogren, right? But like, that's what I'm saying here, is the Arc, you know, of the Arc Rifle, right? These exclusive weapons are broken, bonkers bonanza, and then the shared weapons are worthless generally, like the auto guns and the chain swords and heavy swords and stuff like that. And I get that they're not going to make them on the power level of other stuff. They legitimately don't want these things to be any better. They want there to be like lesser and better weapons, so there's like, you know, sort of chase stuff, but they could at least add a little bit of diversity in there, so I don't feel like I'm playing with recon las gun and slash plasma gun for my 1 bajillion fucking game as the veteran throwing grenades, right? Where every day feels the fucking same. So yeah, there you go. I don't know. What a weird place to end it on. But overall, you know, we're entering into dangerous territory. These are dangerous times, friends, where the balance of the game is in the lurch. And I'm very happy to see that Skitarii was not a further step in the direction of adding more power, more ridiculous AoE clear to the game. He feels a very constrained step at this point in the game, and I'm really hoping that the other characters can follow suit and be brought down to that power level where we can, as we've all found, right? As many of you have found, Skitarii is an insanely fun class to play. And why is that? Is because his like power level doesn't invalidate the game, but he is also still powerful in certain respects, and that is the level we need to nail here. So there you go. Okay, now I can actually fully sign off. Thank you for watching this far. If you did, you are truly a champion, and I respect you greatly. But that's all I have for this video. Thanks for watching, guys. Mr. Riata here. Bye bye.